Okay. I feel like I'm always taking a bit of a guess when it comes to the camera and its setting. Something to work on. So the day is ending. This is a very late vlog for my standards. Typically I do this in the midst of the day, but this is at the end of a client day. What I mean by that is, as I explained, I went to Glasgow today. You might be thinking, oh Ross, you mentioned you're going to get some footage when you're out and about with a client. I did say that, but to be honest, I nearly missed my flight this morning. And it was pretty tight getting back. And when I got back to Dublin, I just decided, let's get home. And so here we are. But today was great. Overall, this was really good client session, and I just kind of thought it'd be interesting to talk through what typically happens on a day like this. And kind of explain, why I do it the way I do it currently, how I see this evolving, and really just talking through. There's a bit of a structure I use. I like to keep these sessions quite open. I think it's important that it is. Part of these sessions are ultimately conversations. There's advice, there's guidance, there's critiquing work, there's, I suppose, building strategy, whatever. But there's a very important component that I believe is just giving people who are running businesses time and space to just get stuff out of their head. So, set the scene. This is with most clients, I'll have an in-person session once a month. Is that scalable? Not particularly, but it doesn't need to be. Two trades of thought on that one. There's a really great piece by Paul Graham. I'm not even going to get into who Paul Graham is too much, to be honest, but he was involved with Y Combinator, very big name in the tech scene for probably the last couple of decades. He has written many a great piece, many a great article. The one that I think is one of his best is the do things that don't scale. And what I took from that and what I apply to a lot of things I do, I've read it a few times, is ultimately that, particularly in the early days of a business, it's really important to do things that, to be honest, are not repeatable if you were doing them hundreds or thousands of times. So again, if you boil that down to an example of a client, an example in relation to client service, if I had 15 clients, is it feasible to go and see every single one of them every month if they're based throughout the world? No, it's not. And that's fine. That'll be a lovely problem to have. So I'll come to that if I hit that point, or when I hit that point. But until then, there's no reason I can't take a quick flight over to Glasgow. It's a 14-hour day, door to door. And it was a fantastic session. The session was just over 4 hours. Plus then we had actually, to be honest, you could really count lunch with your clients as working in some ways, because it is an extension of the session. So 4 to 5 hours with them, which obviously means it's the guts of 9 hours of travel, which is a lot. I probably did collectively about 90 minutes to 2 hours of work, and the rest was pure travel, where I might have sketched things down on an iPad, or scribbled out a quick note or something, or sent an email or two, but it's not deep work or anything. Day was up at 4, nearly missed the flight but got it. I was in Glasgow City at 8:30, did an hour and a half of work, met the guys at 10, went to their space. So all that has happened with them to tee up that session is that they know I've already shared what I feel the priorities are. So I'm usually picking no more than 2 key things. So I say to the guys in advance, look, based on where we're at with things, I would like us to spend X amount of time on this, with the view that if we have time or scope to, we could also go through this. I speak with them both, as I did 2 days ago or a day ago, to establish if there was anything that had come up for them that they really wanted to spend time on. And in this case, the answer was not really, or no, which is fine. I still asked the question at the beginning of the session anyhow, And as it transpired, we were all on the same page that the very first key thing that I proposed anyhow was absolutely the priority for the day. So yeah, session begins. First thing I do is check in on progress towards actions. In the case of the actions from the last session, which would have been pre-Christmas, all three were essentially ongoing things. So it was a case of they'd been set up, they were still happening, they just need to be monitored. That took no time at all. Had a general check-in with each other. A few things come up, which was brilliant, just general points. For example, one of the founders mentioned a couple of things about how he felt it was working and how that had evolved for him in the last few months. And then we got stuck into the meat of the day, which was really talking through their services and their offering. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of this client, but for me, in this case, I had a very important job of steering the conversation and keeping it on track so that A, we maximize the time, but B, I think when you're talking about something as broad as that, it's easy for people to get carried away and can go on all sorts of different tangents and directions. So my responsibility in that session is I put a structure around it. So there's 4 hours. We know we're taking a break at halfway. We actually today moved room, which was kind of meant we had a natural breaking point. So for 90 minutes, I had to try and get through. In my head, I was like, for these 60 to 90 minutes, I'm just going to let them go. Just let the session run, let them unload their mind in relation to services, how they currently are positioned, how they feel the services have evolved over the last few years, try and get an idea of what direction they'd like them to go, and just generally pick their brains so that then in the second session we get a whiteboard and we put a plan together. And that's basically what happened. So the key points there, just to reiterate, my role in this is structuring the session. I also steer the conversation as it happens, and I've deliberately set it up in a way that allows the session to flow naturally for the first 60 minutes or so, but then it also brings it to a point, right, okay, now we need to tighten this up and put a plan around something, and then come away from the session being like, okay, great, we talked about it, discussed the strategy, and we put some initial steps in place. Sounds great, to be honest, but it did go well. So I'm just looking at a note. I wanted to get something across. Yeah, so just a really important point on this is first 60 to 90 minutes went really well. Had a break, went upstairs, got into the room with a whiteboard, and we had loads of space, blank canvas to sketch out what we had learned in the morning, which was just bits and bobs everywhere. Let's bring it to a point now, and let's say this is where we're currently at, this is our offering, what do we want it to look like in the future, and then what are the initial baby steps almost to get us moving towards that. Because what's very common, and particularly with this agency, they have the ability to do lots more things, they have the desire to expand their services. I think in their case it makes sense to do that. So the discussion was more around, less about can we do this, it's more what we prioritize and then how we go about doing it. So with that in mind, we kind of just used a timeline structure. We were like, okay, next week in theory, is there anything we could do? Yes, it would be this. Next month, is there anything we should prioritize? Yes, these things. That enables us then in 2 months' time to do these things, and then by April, the business offering looks like this, which means we can more aggressively target these certain types of businesses. So that was kind of the overall conversation, and yeah, by all means it went really well. Both guys were very happy, the co-founders, they went, came away from the conversation pleased with where it got to. And a really important thing at the end, if it isn't completely clear leaving that room what is going to happen in the next 4 weeks, it's not, I've essentially failed in my eyes. Like, it has to be super, super clear. In the next 4 weeks, these things are going to happen that enable us to do these things down the line, and who's responsible for doing those things. And I always follow up a session the day after with a summary of my notes and any general thoughts and maybe some questions, but specifically it's the actions. It's like, okay, you are doing this, I'm doing this, and it's expected by this date. And that's a bit of accountability for the founders, a bit of accountability for me. It also reassures founders that I'm working on the implementation of this stuff as well, not just saying, hey guys, off you go and do it. So yeah, that's really what the typical session looks like. And then yeah, for what it's worth, we went for lunch, had a chat about a couple of things, said our goodbyes, and then straight to the airport. And didn't nearly miss the flight this time, which was good. And on the flight home, it was quite bumpy, to be honest. So I try to do a bit of work when I can, but yeah, I just watched something because it was quite windy and it wasn't a fantastic journey, to be honest. So that was the day, and we're away tomorrow to Galway for essentially the equivalent session with another client. So I'll kind of report back on that one and see if there was anything different. I mean, obviously it will be different topics with that client, but it might be a different structure, or I might feel differently about the session. But if I was to reflect on the day, overall, great example of why I do this. 14 hours invested, technically I'm billing for 4. Is that feasible to continue long term? Yes and no. Am I concerned about it? Absolutely not, because that was so valuable for the client overall. And in terms of the things I personally needed to do today outside of that session, I'd already got them done earlier in the week, or else I did them in the morning. So brilliant overall, really happy. And we go again tomorrow.